Welcome to the story. Don't forget to like, subscribe and support me. The planet was barren, a windswept desert of red rocks and towering cliffs that stretched far into the horizon. For days, Dr. Elena Roth had been scanning the landscape, her eyes flicking between the jagged formations and the readings on her tablet. A discovery of this magnitude wasn't something to take lightly, and she knew the consequences of rushing in. But as the team descended into the valley below, she couldn't shake the feeling that this was exactly what they had been searching for, a breakthrough that could change everything. "We're close," Elena muttered, her fingers brushing the edge of the ancient inscription carved into the stone beneath her feet. Her breath caught in her throat. The alien language had been dead for millennia, but through painstaking research, she had cracked enough of it to understand what they had found: the catastrophe prison. "Roth, you sure about this?" Commander Holt's voice cut through her thoughts. He stood beside her, his bulk imposing even in the thinning air of the planet. His brow furrowed, eyes scanning the ruins with skepticism. "We don't even know what we're dealing with here." Elena turned to face him, her resolve hardening. "This is it. The inscriptions are clear. Something incredible is locked away here. If we can figure out what, it could lead to a major scientific breakthrough. We have to push forward." Holt sighed, glancing at the rest of the team assembling the equipment. Engineers, scientists, and a handful of soldiers, all part of the expedition, working tirelessly to uncover the mysteries of this forsaken world. He wasn't one to dismiss science, but something about this place set his teeth on edge. Jacob, one of the lead engineers, approached, wiping sweat from his brow. "We've got the equipment set up, Doc. We're ready to crack this thing open." "Good," Elena replied, stepping closer to the massive stone door that stood embedded into the rock. It was ancient, covered in dust and grime, with strange symbols etched across its surface. Her hand hovered over the control panel they had attached to it. "Let's begin." The machine hummed to life, lights flickering as it began scanning the structure. The ground beneath them trembled slightly, sending a shiver down Elena's spine. She shot a glance at Holt, but he remained stoic, his hand resting near his sidearm, a habit more than anything. No one expected trouble from a ruin this old. Then the door shifted, a low grinding noise filled the air, metal scraping against stone. The massive slab began to part, revealing a dark, yawning void beyond. The team held their breath, waiting. Elena stepped forward cautiously, peering into the darkness. Her heart raced, excitement and fear swirling inside her. Beyond the door, the air was thick, oppressive. A strange sensation washed over her, as if the very fabric of reality was bending around them. She blinked, her vision momentarily distorting, but then it cleared. A deep, cavernous chamber lay before them, filled with ancient technology and what appeared to be containment units. "Okay," Elena whispered, stepping into the chamber. "This is it." The team followed, their footsteps echoing through the cavern. They fanned out, examining the alien machinery and the strange structures. Elena's tablet pinged with new data, flooding the screen with readings she could hardly comprehend. "These energy levels. They're off the charts," Jacob said, crouching beside one of the containment units. "Whatever's in here, it's still active." "Be careful," Holt warned, his voice low. "We don't know what this place is capable of." But Elena wasn't listening. Her focus was on a single containment unit at the center of the room. It was different from the others, larger, with alien symbols glowing faintly along its surface. She approached it slowly, her hand trembling as she reached for the control panel attached to it. "Dr. Roth, wait!" one of the scientists called out, but it was too late. Elena's fingers brushed the panel, and the room erupted in light. A sharp, piercing sound filled the air, followed by a deep rumble that shook the entire facility. The containment unit began to open, its walls sliding apart like the door they had just entered. From within, a cold, black mist poured out, swirling and expanding, consuming the light around it. "Get back!" Holt shouted, grabbing Elena's arm and pulling her away. The mist filled the chamber, seeping into every corner, and the temperature plummeted. Elena gasped, her breath turning to frost in the air. Around them, the alien machinery began to hum, coming to life as the mist spread, its tendrils reaching out like living shadows. Then, the world shifted. Elena stumbled, her vision warping as time itself seemed to bend. The walls of the chamber twisted and stretched, gravity flickering between heavy and light. The other team members cried out, some collapsing as the ground beneath them gave way. "What the hell is happening?" Holt yelled, struggling to stay on his feet. Elena stammered, trying to focus through the disorienting chaos. "I don't know." The mist swirled faster, its dark tendrils reaching out to envelop the team. One by one, the lights on their suits flickered out, plunging them into darkness. Elena felt her heart racing, the cold biting at her skin as she stumbled toward the exit, but the door was gone. Time stretched and compressed in unnatural ways, seconds feeling like hours, then snapping back to moments. The ground beneath them shifted violently, and Elena barely managed to stay on her feet. All around her, the environment morphed to plants that hadn't existed before began sprouting from the ground. Their growth accelerated beyond belief. Small creatures skittered across the floor, mutating as they moved, their forms grotesque and twisted. Elena's mind raced. It's the entity. It's changing the natural laws of the planet. Time, gravity, life forms. They're all destabilizing. "We need to get out of here," Holt shouted, pulling one of the scientists to his feet. "Now!" But as they scrambled to regroup, one of the engineers, Jacob, was caught in a sudden gravitational surge. His body lifted off the ground, weightless for a moment, before being crushed back down with a sickening crunch. Elena turned, her scream dying in her throat as she watched his broken body collapse to the floor. Panic set in. The team scattered, each member trying to find an escape, but there was none. The walls seemed to close in, the alien technology twisting into unrecognizable shapes. Time loops trapped them in endless cycles of horror, with some aging rapidly before their eyes, while others were frozen in place, their expressions locked in terror. "This is wrong," Elena gasped, clutching at the tablet in her hand, which was now flickering with unreadable data. "This isn't how it was supposed to be." Holt grabbed her arm, shaking her. "We have to move." Now, the two of them managed to pull away from the epicenter of the chaos, dodging collapsing machinery and the mutated creatures that now roamed the halls. As they ran, the environment continued to shift around Ama. What had once been a stable, lifeless planet was now a nightmare of constant transformation. Elena's mind reeled. The entity they had released wasn't just a creature, it was a force. An anomaly that had been imprisoned here for a reason. It wasn't meant to exist in this universe, and now that it was free, it was rewriting the laws of reality itself. "We need to contain it," Elena muttered, her voice shaky. "We need to put it back in the prison." "How the hell do we do that?" Holt demanded, keeping pace beside her. "I don't know," she admitted, "but if we don't, this entire planet and USA will be destroyed." Their path led them deeper into the alien ruins, the air growing colder with every step. Time continued to warp, the seconds dragging out like molasses before snapping back in violent jolts. Holt checked his communicator, but the signal was dead. There was no way to call for help. As they reached a massive chamber, Elena skidded to a halt, her eyes widening. This room was different, larger, more intricate than any they had seen before. At its center stood a massive machine, ancient yet still functional, its surface covered in the same alien symbols that adorned the prison. "This must be it," she breathed. "The control center." Holt didn't hesitate. "What do we need to do?" Elena rushed to the machine, her fingers flying over the alien controls. She didn't fully understand the technology, but her research had given her enough to work with. The symbols on the machine glowed faintly, and the ground beneath them rumbled once more. I think I can reverse the release," she said, her voice trembling. "If I can just lock it back in." The mist swirled around them, thickening as the entity sensed their intentions. Holt stood guard, his weapon drawn, but there was nothing he could shoot at. The entity was all around them, an ever-present force manipulating reality. Elena's hands shook as she worked, the machine's controls responding slowly to her commands. The air grew colder still, the pressure building as the entity fought against their efforts. "We don't have much time," Holt shouted, his voice barely audible over the roar of the shifting environment. "I'm trying," Elena snapped, her heart pounding in her chest. Finally, the machine hummed to life, its ancient mechanisms grinding into motion. The mist recoiled slightly, its tendrils pulling back as the containment field began to re-establish itself. Elena felt a surge of hope. Maybe they could fix this, maybe they could contain the entity once more. But just as the field began to close, the mist surged forward, overwhelming the room. Elena cried out as the controls were ripped from her grasp, the machine sputtering and faltering. "No!" she screamed, her eyes wide with horror. The entity wasn't going to allow itself to be imprisoned again. It lashed out with all its power, twisting the room around them. The walls buckled, gravity reversed, and time fractured once more. Elena and Holt were thrown into the air, tumbling through the chaos. "I won't let it win," Elena whispered to herself, her vision blurring as the entity closed in. Elena clawed her way toward the machine once more, her fingers digging into the alien controls. Elena clawed her way toward the machine once more, her fingers digging into the alien controls as the world around her twisted and warped. Holt was still somewhere in the chaos, his grunts audible as he fought to keep his balance, but she couldn't focus on him. Everything depended on containing the entity, locking it back in the prison where it belonged. The alien symbols flickered erratically as she input the final sequence, each movement of her hand sluggish, as if time itself was resisting her actions. The air was thick with pressure, making it hard to breathe, but she pushed through the pain, through the disorientation, clinging to the faint hope that they could survive this. Just as her fingers brushed the final control, the mist surged again, wrapping around her like a living thing. It squeezed her chest, suffocating her, filling her lungs with ice-cold air. Her vision dimmed, the weight of the entity's presence crushing her thoughts. For a moment, she felt herself slipping away, her body going limp as the mist dragged her down. But something snapped inside her, a flicker of resolve, of anger. She wouldn't let it end like this. Not after everything they'd been through. With a final, desperate burst of strength, she slammed her hand onto the control panel. A deafening roar filled the chamber. The machine hummed to life, its ancient mechanisms grinding and shifting. The symbols glowed brighter, casting the room in an eerie light. The mist recoiled, its tendrils flailing wildly as the containment field began to close around it. Elena collapsed to the ground, gasping for air as the pressure lifted. The mist shrieked, a sound that pierced her ears and rattled her bones, but the field held firm, slowly pulling the entity back into its prison. The room shook violently, debris raining down from the ceiling as the alien technology strained under the force of the entity's resistance. Holt staggered over to her, his face pale, his breath coming in ragged gasps. Did you do it?" "I think so," Elena croaked, pushing herself up on trembling arms. "But it's not over yet. We need to get out of here." The ground beneath them trembled, cracks spidering across the floor as the containment field strained to hold the entity in place. They had minutes at best before the entire structure collapsed. Elena forced herself to stand, her legs weak and unsteady, and together with Holt, they stumbled toward the exit. Behind them, the entity howled in rage, its form distorting as it was pulled deeper into the prison. The air grew heavier with every step they took, gravity shifting unpredictably, pulling them in different directions. Elena's body ached with the effort of moving through the distorted space, but she didn't stop. She couldn't. As they reached the corridor leading back to the surface, the ground gave a violent lurch, and Elena was thrown against the wall, her head snapping back against the cold stone. For a moment, her vision went black, and she felt herself slipping away, but then Holt's hand was on her shoulder, pulling her upright. "Stay with me," he growled, his grip tightening. "We're almost out." Elena nodded weakly, pushing through the haze in her mind. Together, they stumbled through the collapsing ruin, dodging falling debris and skittering across the unstable ground. The air was thick with dust, making it hard to see, but Holt's steady presence beside her kept her moving. They reached the surface just as the ground gave one final, violent heave. The ruins behind them collapsed in on themselves, a deafening roar echoing through the valley as the ancient structure crumbled to dust. For a moment, the air was still, the planet silent, as if holding its breath. Then the sky darkened. Elena looked up, her heart sinking. Above them, the once clear sky was now filled with swirling clouds of black mist, the remnants of the entity still lingering in the atmosphere. The planet itself had changed. Its trees twisted and deformed, their branches stretching unnaturally toward the sky. The ground beneath their feet shifted, the very laws of nature still in flux. "We didn't stop it," Elena whispered, her voice hollow. Holt stood beside her, his face grim. "Number. But we slowed it down." Elena's chest tightened. Slowing it down wasn't enough. The entity was still here, still reshaping the planet, still unraveling the very fabric of reality. They had bought themselves some time, but it wouldn't be long before the entity found a way to break free again. "What do we do now?" she asked, her voice trembling. Holt's eyes hardened. "We get off this planet. We warn the others." He tapped his communicator, but there was no response. The signal was still dead. The entity's influence had cut them off from the rest of the team, from the ship orbiting above. They were stranded here, alone on a dying world. Elena's heart pounded in her chest as the realization set in. "We're trapped." Holt's jaw clenched. "Not if we can make it to the communications tower." Elena blinked, the haze of fear clearing slightly. The communications tower, it was their only hope. If they could reach it, they might be able to send a distress signal, call for help. But the tower was miles away, and the planet's surface was rapidly becoming more treacherous with every passing minute. "We don't have much time," Holt said, his voice steady. "Let's move." They set off, their pace slow but determined. The ground beneath them shifted constantly, gravity pulling them in unpredictable directions, but they kept moving, driven by the faint hope that they could still escape this nightmare. All around them, the planet continued to warp, the landscape twisting into grotesque, alien forms. Hours passed, though it was impossible to tell with the erratic flow of time. Elena's body ached, her muscles screaming in protest with every step, but she pushed through the pain. She had to. They were humanity's only hope. If they didn't make it off this planet, no one would know what had happened here. No one would know the danger that was now loose in the galaxy. As they crested a ridge, the communications tower finally came into view, its spire reaching toward the darkened sky. Elena's heart leapt in her chest, a flicker of hope sparking to life. They were close, so close. But the ground trembled beneath them once more, and this time, it wasn't just a tremor. The entity had followed them. The mist swirled at the edges of their vision, creeping closer, its tendrils reaching out to reclaim what it had lost. Holt cursed under his breath. "It's not going to let us leave." Elena's mind raced. They couldn't outrun it. Not now. The entity had grown stronger, more desperate. It was bending reality itself to stop them. They had to fight it, but how? How did you fight something that wasn't bound by the same rules as you? Then it hit her. "The machine," she muttered, her voice barely a whisper. Holt frowned. "What?" "The machine we used to contain it," Elena said, her thoughts racing. "It's ancient technology. It's meant to work with the laws of this universe. But what if? What if we use the communications tower to send a signal strong enough to disrupt the entity's influence?" Holt stared at her, his eyes narrowing. "You want to use the tower to broadcast a containment field?" "It's risky," Elena admitted. "But if we can boost the signal, it might be enough to hold the entity back long enough for us to escape." Holt hesitated, then nodded. "Let's do it." They ran toward the tower, the mist closing in around them. Elena's heart pounded in her chest as they reached the base of the structure. The control panel was covered in dust and grime, but it still worked. She quickly began inputting commands, her fingers flying over the keys. The ground shook violently, the mist swirling faster now, its tendrils reaching out to engulf them. Elena's hands trembled, but she kept working, her focus laser sharp. "Hurry," Holt growled, his voice tense. "I'm almost there," Elena muttered, her heart racing. The mist surged forward, and Holt raised his weapon, firing into the darkness, but the bullets did nothing. The entity wasn't physical. It couldn't be harmed by conventional means. Elena's fingers flew over the control panel, her breath coming in ragged gasps. The ground trembled beneath them, the tower swaying dangerously, but she didn't stop. She couldn't stop. Finally, with a final, desperate push, she hit the last key. The tower hummed to life, its spire glowing with a bright, pulsing light. The mist recoiled, its tendrils flailing wildly as the containment field spread out from the tower, enveloping the entity. Elena collapsed to the ground, gasping for air as the pressure lifted. The mist shrieked, a sound that pierced her ears and rattled her bones, but the field held firm, slowly pulling the entity back. "We did it," Elena whispered, her voice barely audible. Holt stood beside her, his face pale but resolute. "Let's get out of here." They signaled the ship, and moments later, the roar of engines filled the air as their rescue vessel descended from the sky. As they lifted off, Elena watched the planet shrink below them, its surface still warping and twisting. The entity was contained for now, but she knew the danger wasn't over. They had survived, but the galaxy had only seen a glimpse of the terror that had been unleashed.